Paul de Witt wrote in the German language catalog for the 1900 World Exhibition in Paris that in Germany, quote, in 1899, there were 435 piano factories, 140 of which were in Berlin. However, he also writes that, quote, more than half of production goes abroad, quote end. This is therefore a global phenomenon, not a local one. The instruments on display are normally, of course, the finest examples. A lot of the pianos on display were made of rosewood, mahogany, jacaranda, and zebrawood veneers. Some examples from the 1851 Great Exhibition are shown here. And see who can read it. It's made of palisandre wood, rosewood. It's also interesting because they advertised the concert grand piano built after era, so with these double escapement piano action system, which is here mentioned as a newborn, and also here with different kind of wood. But what about the other instruments, especially wind instruments? Beside the classical orchestras, they are mainly played by the military. The importance of military bands at the time can be seen in a musical event at the 1867 World's Fair in Paris, where military bands from Prussia, France, Austria, Bavaria, Russia, Spain, Belgium, Baden, and the Netherlands competed against each other. In addition to a piece of their own choice, all participants had to play the overture from Carl Maria von Weber's opera Oberon as a compulsory piece, which the music directors had to arrange for their military bands in advance. Prussia won with 20 votes, followed by France with 18 votes and Austria with 17 votes. For diplomatic reasons, however, all three military bands were awarded the first prize. Wilhelm Wiebrecht, who conducted the Prussian military band, here, later wrote somewhat indignantly. In Germany wrote, alles ist mir gelungen, der erste Preis wurde mir zugeteilt, dann aber trat die Bourgeoisie dazwischen. So in English it's like all has been successful for me. I was awarded the first prize, but then the bourgeoisie intervened. As the military music is a topic for itself, and due to the limited time, I will continue to a short summary. And I'm also looking forward to the military music panel tomorrow. The lecture was intended to provide a relatively broad overview of how developments in musical instrument making affect society and vice versa. Innovations in musical instrument making open up new possibilities and give rise to new social demands. In the 19th century, the two went hand in hand. Trade exhibitions in Berlin, for example, illustrate the rapid rise of the piano industry and, indirectly, of piano music as a practiced art form. At the same time, instrument makers at the exhibitions naturally also dictate what is considered as good. After all, these exhibitions are ultimately advertising for their business. The use of sometimes precious materials awakens desires in visitors, most of whom come from the middle class. Whether they end up buying an exclusive instrument or a standard one depends, as it does today, on how much money they have in their pockets. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much for the absorbing paper. Would anybody like to offer a question or comment?
Thank you very much. It is fascinating how the producers of musical instruments dealt with famous performers. I think it's the magnificent link between Steinway and Franz Liszt, which is well known. It is similar to today's representation of cars being given to famous footballers or actors and so on. Was there any feedback, if you know if any feedback from the performers then to the producers with suggestions what to improve.
What to improve on the musical instrument?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. I think in the development process, these things always go hand in hand, like today with developments. Sometimes it's written in bigger articles that they support each cell. Yes, when you go back to that development of the bass tuba, that's such an example in the end. Because Wilhelm Wiebrecht, who developed it, he was a conductor and a musician itself, but he was not the instrument builder, and he needs the instrument builder. And found him in Johann Gottfried Moritz here in Berlin. And in the end, that it's written very how they collaborate. And Wiebrecht was also in contact with another instrument builder before, but they were a bit, yeah.
Yes, and this procedure giving a famous performer an instrument,
yes,
was this effective? Because
yes,
I know
I think
the memoirs.
what you mean is a bit in another way. I think with these famous musicians, there are also books, letters, printings, photographs, and so on. And it's also listed in mostly in companies' catalogs, where it's advertised at the end mostly some quotes where it said Franz Liszt mentioned that this piano is the most superb whatever since the piano was invented. Yes, but and they say what is positive on these instruments, but it's advertisement. So,
but well, they were expensive probably. So people who played well, who wanted the new instrument, they would invest in it. But
yeah, for sure. Yeah, but yeah, the musicians always there's always a feedback between the instrument builders and the musicians.
Thank you.
I have time for one more question. Professor Lara Brandl has a question.
Yes.
Just want to mention the piano collection by Paul Badouros Koda, famous pianist, who has owned about 50 instruments, piano instruments, and he's given it to a museum, a small museum, here close to Kremsmünster, under the condition that they have to be tuned and playable, all of them. And if you go there and say who you are, they have the opportunity to play all of them chronologically, the latest harpsichords through the whole 19th century to the very latest modern piano instrument. And this is an extremely wonderful experience. So this is really a live experience, how the pianos develop. Yeah. It's now closed because they have no more money. Yeah, but it was wonderful. I was there, I think, twice on my own and once with students. The best experience you can have, and just to do it on yourself and see how it changes, how the touch, how the sound is, and great. Yeah.
Just can just underline it as a museums person. Yes,
you have to play them. Then
right,
and you understand what you're talking about.
Yes, for sure. When you see the development of the piano, yeah, let's say from the Mozart to the Liszt era, it's there are probably 20 different instruments. What you need when you really want to have a really good historical performance practice, because it's super different instruments.
Right. Especially Mozart is not so rarely played on historical instruments, and Mozart needs it so much.
Yeah, but also Beethoven, it sounds totally different. And just think to keep it short.
And we have a
when you play also Beethoven on these typical instruments of this time, the sound is much more colorful of that time, because the instruments were not standardized, and you have these regional differences. And when you play it on a Viennese instrument, it sounds totally different than on a Berlin instrument, and so on. And when you play it on an instrument from 1820, it sounds different on an instrument from 1825. And so the big disadvantage, so to say, of these world exhibitions and world trade fairs is that they mark a starting point for so that it's more that it's built up with these Vereinheitlichung, it's just a centralized instruments, so to say, that you don't have these variation anymore. So the Steinway sounds like a Steinway, and doesn't matter if you are listening to the Steinway in Australia or whatever, yeah, and you don't have any more these local traditions. So it's more uniform instrument, and that's yeah, in the end, part of the globalization, starting globalization.
I think we are better running a little bit behind the curious conversation. As you were speaking, I was just thinking that Bernard Shaw, the Irish writer, said that the invention of the piano was to music what the printing press was to literature. So yeah, to show that. You know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that wonderful paper. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our second speaker is Dr. Jankov from Split, and he will address us on the policy of purchasing the organ from 1781 in the Franciscan Church of Our Lady of Health. Thank you.
Croatian, but that's why it's in English. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Franjevačka crkva i samostan, također i župa Gospe od zdravlja u Splitu na Dobrome, u kojoj od 1888. djeluje i sjedište Franjevačke provincije Presvetoga Otkupitelja, jedno je od zapaženijih mjesta njegovanja crkvene glazbe u novijoj splitskoj povijesti. Mada je pritom riječ uglavnom o 20. i 21. stoljeću, ista tvrdnja utemeljeno se može izreći i za drugo 19. stoljeće. Ovom prilikom sagledat ćemo politiku nabavke orgulja mletačkog graditelja Giovannija Pizzenardija, to sam čak i Piccinardi da ga izgovaraju, načinjenih za staru samostansku crkvu Gospe od zdravlja 1781. godine, uz osvrt na mrežu sudionika u tom procesu, od crkvenih do građanskih lica. Pizzenardijeve orgulje, jedini za sada poznati rad toga majstora na istočnoj Jadranskoj obali, u Franjevačkoj crkvi na Dobrome omogućile su očuvanje i ulančavanje orguljske kulture, odnosno orguljaške djelatnosti, u odnosu na prethodne iz oko 1744. i potonje orgulje iz 1906. Dakle, tijekom čitava 19. stoljeća, kao i u prvom desetljeću 20. stoljeća. Što bi se od četvorih orgulja, koliko ih je posjedovala crkva na Dobrome, uključujući i recentne iz 1961. koji su rad tvrtke Kaufmann iz Beča, do danas je upravo Pizzenardijev instrument uspio ostvariti najveći kontinuitet, 125 godina. Njegov tehnički ustroj i sudbina nepoznati su, no srećom sačuvane su neke rukopisne orgulske muzikalije koje su se na njima izvodile, a moguće je načiniti rekonstrukciju slijeda Franjevaca orguljaša na Dobrome tijekom 19. stoljeća. Prve orgulje u samostanskoj crkvi, kojoj je prethodni titular bio Presveti Otkupitelj, kao što i provincija nosi ime, razabiremo tek da su postojale barem od 1774. kada je na njima orguljao fra Josip Kukavica. Služile su nešto manje od jednoga desetljeća, zbog čega je za pretpostaviti da su nabavljene kao polovne. Nije im poznata veličina, jednako kao niti ime graditelja, no morale su biti mletačko-dalmatinskog tipa. O sudbini ovoga glazbala ne zna se ništa. Druge orgulje iz 1781. poznajemo samo prema nekoliko povijesnih crtica i to isključivo zahvaljujući napisu fra Ante Crnice u knjizi Naša Gospa od zdravlja i njezina slava iz 1939. godine. Pritom je bitno izdvojiti sljedeće. Citat. Godine 1781. nabavljene su orgulje. One su djelo majstora Ivana Pizzenardi iz Murana kraj Mletaka. Zapale su 100 zlatnih cekina, koje je otac Bareza izručio 24. listopada 1781. preuzvišenom gospodinu Ivanu Luki Garanjinu, splitskom nadbiskupu, da ih on pošalje u Mletke, vitezu Marku Kontarini, izravno ili preko svoga nečaka Dominika Garanjina, a da mu budu izručeni kad profesor Donantum Barbini u Muranu pregleda orgulje i nađe ih u redu. Ove su orgulje bile u svetištu do godine 1906. kad ih je otac Ivan Benutić zamijenio s novima, nabavljenima kod poznate tvrtke braće Riger u Jägerndorfu, Čehoslovačkoj. Tako je napisao 1937. Kako je razvidno, druge orgulje u crkvi Gospe od zdravlja, smještene također u gornjemu koru, služile su do 1906. kad ih je dao ukloniti tadašnji gvardijan Benutić. Po uklanjanju o njima se zapravo ne zna ništa. Izgledno je da su s obzirom na cijenu te veličinu same crkve Picenardijeve orgulje bile glazbalo barem srednje veličine, to jest tipa B. Dispozicija im je morala odgovarati orguljarskome kanonu venecijansko-dalmatinske provenijencije. O samome graditelju nije bilo moguće pronaći odgovarajuće podatke, vjerojatno je riječ o jednome od solidnih mletačkih orguljara djelatnih u drugoj polovici 18. stoljeća, a zasigurno i osobi koja je morala poznavati don Petra Nakića i njegov rad. Ovo je kod nas, barem za sada, jedino Picenardijevo poznato glazbalo, što ga čini dodatno zanimljivim, a daljnja istraživanja mogla bi dati još neke odgovore. Osvrnemo li se ovdje nanovo na sadržaj Crničina napisa, posebno je zanimljivo razmotriti mrežu ljudi, ondašnjih odličnika i javnih ličnosti i u Splitu i u Veneciji, koji su bili uključeni u nabavu. Prvi među njima, fra Jeronim Bareza, bio jedan od gvardijana samostana na Dobrome, pokretač javnog štovanja Gospe od zdravlja te još nekih pobožnosti, redovnik koji je trajno nastojao i oko unapređenja samostanskog života, a u provinciji obavljao još neke istaknute funkcije. On je imao uručiti svotu. Pitanje je li to bila cijela, vjerojatno jest, od 100 cekina splitskome nadbiskupu metropoliti, meceni književniku Ivanu Luki Garanjinu. Ovaj ih je dalje trebao po svojemu nečaku Ivanu Dominiku, budućem političaru, fiziokratu i pristaši francuske vlasti, ili neposredno proslijediti mletačkome plemiću Marku Fontarini, vjerojatno zastupniku Giovannija Picenardija, orguljara o kojemu, dakle, nemamo nikakvi drugi podatak. Posljednja, no također zanimljiva osoba u ovoj grupi svakako je venecijanski svećenik orguljar don Antonio Barbini, suvremenik i kolega don Petra Nakića, obojice Dačija, Kalida, Picenardija i drugih, koji orgulje u Veneciji kao vještak imao ispitati te splitskim fratrima dati pristanak za konačnu isplatu. Ono što se jest sačuvalo vezano je za ove orgulje, dvije su vrijedne zbirke, jedna iz 18. stoljeća, jedna iz 19. stoljeća. Sljedeći trag fra Petra Bezine u arhivu samostana Gospe od zdravlja na Dobrome pronašao sam uz pomoć fra Stjepana Grgata i fra Stjepana Čove, dvije od 3 rukopisne zbirke koje je dakle, Bezina informativno popisao 1993. u knjizi Rukopisna baština Franjevaca provincije Presvetoga Otkupitelja. Dok su se notne zbirke RK 107 i 111 uzmogle pronaći, treća, nažalost, može se smatrati da je zagubljena. Ova koja je označena brojkom 107 svjedoči prije svega činjenicu da je veza između provincije Presvetog Otkupitelja i samostana San Francesco de la Vigna u Veneciji postojana još od vremena Bosne Srebrene, opstajala i nakon pada Serenissime. A zanimljiv je i podatak da je bila uručena na cvjetnicu 1807. fra Jeronimu iz Skradina. Bio je to fra Jeronim Šimum Palatino, u jednome navratu i provincijal provincije Presvetog Otkupitelja, koji se mada službom nikada nije bio za to određen, očito zanimao i za glazbu, odnosno za orguljanje. Putem rism baze podataka autorstvo je bilo moguće odrediti za 4 skladbe u ovoj zbirci te ih pripisati trojici skladatelja. 5. je skladba zajedno s autorom utvrđena osobnom identifikacijom. Pojedine skladbe, eventualno inačice, mogu se zateći pohranjene i u Ujedinjenom kraljevstvu, u Warminsteru, Njemačkoj, Ansbachu, Berlinu, Dresdenu, Karlsruhe, u Rudolfštatu, u Italiji, u Rimu te kod nas u Omišu. U pitanju su skladatelji Antonio Nava, Franz Josef Haydn, Ignaz Pleyel i Tommaso Resti. Druga je zbirka veoma vrijedna, to je bilo jasno već na prvi pogled, i izuzetno je svjedočanstvo negdašnjih glazbenih uzusa u Franjevačkom samostanu na Dobrome, odnosno inklinacija u najmanju ruku jednog od fratara koji su je svojedobno bili pribavljeni. Nije poznato kada niti tko. Do Splita je vjerojatno prispjela ili po nabavci prvih orgulja, dakle oko 1774. ili pak drugih. Krasi je, kako vidimo i ovdje, siguran i precizan rukopis, divna zapravo kaligrafija i to je djelo stvari jednoga prepisivača. Pretraživanjem putem risma otkrio sam da je riječ o zbirci od 12 sonata za violinu i violone ili cembalo, sonata violino i violone o cembalo, opus 5, poznatoga talijanskog skladatelja i violinista Arcangela Corellija. Također, dovoljno je reći da se samo u prvome stavku inačice ili kompletni prijepisi mogu naći od Europe do Sjedinjenih država poput Dresdena, Berkeleya, Bostona, Leipziga, Brisela, Berlina i Pariza. I na koncu bih za zaključak rekao ovo. Ovom prigodom sažeto smo sagledali povijest i politiku nabavke orgulja Giovannija Picenardija iz 1781. načinjenih za staru Franjevačku crkvu Gospe zdravlja na Dobrome u Splitu, koje, kako se čini, predstavljaju jedino poznato djelo ovoga mletačkog orguljara u našim stranama. Inicijativa Franjevaca s Dobroga u drugoj polovici 18. stoljeća, pri čemu se preko pomno osmišljene mreže pripadnika crkvenih, plemićkih i građanskih krugova uzmoglo nabaviti nove orgulje iz Venecije, sjajan je primjer sinergije različitih aktera u službi poboljšanja glazbenih prilika u jednoj redovničkoj zajednici. Što više, orgulje koje su punih 125 godina služile u crkvi na Dobrome, iako su primarno bile liturgijski instrument, posredno su doprinijele i obogaćenju javnog glazbenog života u gradu Splitu. Uklanjanjem Picenardijeva glazbala godine 1906. na Dobrome je okončano drugo 19. stoljeće. Jedini preostali svjedok pripadajuće orgulske kulture jesu tek dvoje sačuvane muzikalije. Rukopisna zbirka Corellijevih sonata za cembalo i violinu, vjerojatno iz 18. stoljeća, te druga Piciolatova iz 1807. Potonju, koja materijalno pripada 19. stoljeću, ispunjavalo je više ruku, vjerojatno samih njezinih korisnika fratara. Ona je prvorazredno svjedočanstvo o kulturi orguljskog muziciranja na Dobrome, realiziranoga za vrijeme centralnih liturgijskih funkcija, mise i časoslova. Koloplet stilskih prinosa, od galantnih do klasičkih, kao svevrsnih odjeka 18. stoljeća, ocrtava nastojanje fratara glazbenika da svoju redovničku sredinu, ali i širu, onu splitsku, obogate orgulskim skladbama koje su se izvodile solistički ili u alternativnim maniri. Tehnička razina od redovnika je zahtijevala prosječne, a ponekad i dosta zahtjevne izvedbene mogućnosti, osobito kad se radi o Corellijevim skladbama, koje su dakako vrijednost po sebi. Po tome pojedine Franjevce, osobito one koji su se u samostanu na Dobrome svirački zadržali dulje, dakle od nekoliko više godina pa i desetljeća, primjerice fra Ivan Šoda, odnosno fra Frano Burić, treba staviti uz bok splitskih katedralnih orguljaša, ali i ubrojiti u redove zauzeti dalmatinskih glazbenika i glazbenih učitelja. Mada je riječ o redovnicima koji su se ostvarivali nenametljivo, u cijelosti okvirima svoje samostanske zajednice, njihov učinak pokazuje se kao bitan udio u cjelini dalmatinske i hrvatske glazbene kulture. I ovdje za kraj ja sam donio 4 kratka verseta, pa evo da ih poslušamo. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Marco. Would anybody like to again, Andrea, I think? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. What I was missing that is a description of the construction of the organ. I mean, which register? I don't know the German words. Which stops the head? How was the construction?
It's probably typical Venetian Dalmatian organ with the
One man.
registri spezzati, principale basso, principale soprano, ottava, quinta, decima, decima nona, vigesima seconda, vigesima sesta, nona, trigesima terza, ripieno.
Yeah.
Typical Italian.
And pedals?
A short with a
A short
short octave. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, then I can imagine how it would sound.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have a lot of such organs in Dalmatia.
Yeah, I know such Italian organs, but I thought maybe there's something special there.
I think it was a typical instrument
Okay, thanks.
from the period.
Thanks, Andrea. Can I just ask one question? Because, you know, if you're sharing, you often don't get a chance to ask a question. You're sitting there, so I'm going to ask a very simple question. Please, all the organologists, forgive me. But this is the first time I've ever heard of organ being built on site. I was absolutely astonished by it. That gentleman in Murano, the clarity was perfect before it was assembled in Split. This is it's the first time I've ever encountered that. Now, maybe it's very common. Yeah. But Liga, for instance, we build most of the organs now, certainly in the trade. But I don't know how they even did that. I mean, in terms of acoustic and light.
I think by the boat, yeah, from the wings to Split.
The impression, would it be, the impression seems to be that this Barberini man kind of vetted the whole complete instrument, or the money was paid over. Maybe organ building has changed.
I don't know. They were very serious about the
Never come across that before. Christian
acquisition.
In some parts, maybe you have to adjust some parts to the new building, so to say, from the, I don't know, wind channels and things that doesn't fit the building, but to dismantle the pipes, put it on the boat. I know it's like a normal export of instruments. It's just a big larger thing.
Maybe they had the space for something, the proportion, and sold them.
But it's a typical instrument, nothing good. Probably, yes, but we don't have any data about that.
That explains. Yeah. We're just pushing on a tiny bit, but maybe get one more question from the but if not, that's do I thank you for wonderful. Thank you very
Thank you very much.
And our final speaker this afternoon is Akil Kienbos from Freiburg. And Akil will speak to us on attracting and repulsing the mechanized repertoire of fairground organs and the urban music scenes in Switzerland at the turn of the 20th century. Please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the organizers of the conference. It's great to be here in Zagreb. And thanks everyone for still being here. Yeah, almost done now. So to end this day of talks, I would like to consider a specific musical site and context that is too rarely mentioned when addressing the evolution of music consumption in Europe at the end of the 19th century. Despite the enduring neglect and the lack of interest shown until recently by scholars, the fanfare proves to be an important locus of the transformation both of attitude towards music and of technologies to convey it. The research I will present to you now is part of my ongoing doctoral research project, which is itself integrated in the Swiss National Science Foundation funded project of the musical world of fairgrounds in Switzerland, 19th, 21st centuries, led by Professor Anna Stolknecht at the University of Fribourg. This project aims to clarify the role of music on the fairground and how music contributed to structure such a social area, both in its own internal way and of functioning and through its links to other institutions. In today's presentation, I will show how the fairground organ, an instrument specifically designed to provide music on rides run by show people, was integrated in the broader dynamics of disseminating music in public spaces. More precisely, I am interested here in the adoption of a bourgeois ethos by the show people community, and I argue that specific music instruments and repertoire had a great importance in such a process. To start, let me introduce briefly the instruments we are talking about. Fairground organs originate from small portable instruments found as early as the 18th century, and probably before, and used mainly by street entertainers, often to accompany a visual show, such as the Magic Lantern. From the relatively simple system built in the barrel organ, larger instruments able to play louder and with multiple timbres were developed. From the salons and the cabinets of curiosities, where they were first shown, these orchestra machines returned to the street and were finally taken up by show people in the last quarter of the 19th century. It was during that period that the mechanization of the fanfare started, and the organ became an essential part of the attraction it accompanied. Indeed, one of the crucial tasks in show people's business is to attract the attention of the people passing by, for which the mechanical organ proved to be a powerful tool. Moreover, in the second half of the 19th century, steam power began to be used to put merry-go-round, Ferris wheels, or roller coasters into motion. So the music produced by the instrument was also useful to cover the noise of the engine. And finally, the organ was used to create a visual appeal, often large. It was carved with elaborate designs reminiscent of 18th century Baroque or Rococo style, and decorated with figures which were sometimes animated. Standing in the middle of the attraction or at the front of it, yet the organ was in the period between 1880 and 1930 an indispensable tool for most of the individuals or the families working on the fairground. However, after the outbreak of the First World War, changes in the economy of the fairground and the appearance of gramophone and loudspeakers, these instruments progressively fell out of use. Now, let's look at how such instruments were sold to their owners. Here, we see a few advertisements published in the official journal of the French Syndicate of Show People between the years 1888 and 1895. These announcements, submitted by 3 different companies, present mechanical organs that share at least 2 characteristics. First, they are especially conceived to be used by people working on the fairground, people named the forain in French. Secondly, these instruments are meant to play military concerts or military music. These indications are recurring, as we can see, and though these 3 examples come from France, they are also relevant when speaking about the Swiss situation. Here is another advertisement, this one published in a Swiss newspaper announcing upcoming shows by an itinerant cinema. Here, the orchestra machine is used as a selling point when addressing the audience. And here we can read that one of the great advantages of the mechanical organ is that it can supersede a substantial number of human musicians and instructed musicians, a small detail. In these examples, we see that the fairground organ as an instrument is strongly linked with the military band in the way it was meant to sound and by the repertoire it was meant to play, but also because of the places where it would play, that is, urban public space. The purpose of reproducing the sound of the whole orchestra is clearly expressed since the inception of the orchestrion. The orchestrion is another mechanical instrument that was to be played indoors at a relatively lower volume than the fairground organ, although the term is sometimes used as a synonym for the fairground organ. This intention for the fairground organ to reproduce the sound of an orchestra is even more explicit when we look at the figures added on some models, such as this German instrument. The association between the human band and the orchestra machine was also a matter of repertoire. Here on the left, we see an advertisement published in a newspaper from Bern for a concert that took place on the 9th July 1876 at the Bee Hübeli, a restaurant where concerts were and are still frequently held. On the right, this is an excerpt of a music paper rolls catalog by the German organ building company Ruth and Sohn. And although there is a gap of almost 50 years between these two documents, a lot of similarities can be found between the concert program and the catalog. Two pieces, for example, are present in both publications: Bellini's Norma Overture and a potpourri from La Fille de Madame Angot, an opera comique composed by Charles Lecoq. Besides, the typology of other pieces is quite unsurprisingly distributed between the march, the waltz, and the quadrille. This is consistent with the general practice of military bands playing throughout Europe, whether in restaurant, café, bars, or parade ground. There, as research on this topic has shown, and as we'll see probably tomorrow as well, transcriptions of operas, dances, and popular tunes were played for audiences gathered in a more or less informal setting. From this comparison, it appears that the music heard on the fairground was closely related to that of other urban venues. As the popularity of brass bands reached its peak around the end of the 19th century, it seems natural that show people try to emulate their success to entertain their own patrons. But more fundamentally, that emulation was part of the reshaping of the fanfare by its main actors. Indeed, the main characteristic of the late 19th century fanfare is its mechanization. In fact, from the last decades of the 18th century, when traditional fairs lost their importance as sites of commercial exchange and trade, they became places devoted to entertainment, but also to scientific curiosity. This new role in popularization of technical, medical, colonial novelties grew into the establishment of official state-organized world's fairs. That contributed to firmly tying the notion of progress and the strong ideological discourses it conveyed to the domain of show and spectacle. This also transformed the means of providing entertainment, requiring tools that reflected modernity. As a result, entertainment became more and more formalized as an economical sector in its own right, and the show people elaborated a new status for themselves to be recognized as legitimate professionals. To achieve this goal, communities of show people organized on a national level with the creation of syndicates, first in France in 1882, and the Union of Swiss Show People was founded in 1891. The title of the journal published by the association is telling, because it changed at some point from Le Forain Suisse to l'Industriel Forain Suisse. In the French-speaking areas of Europe, Industriel Forain became the common term to designate show people, a name that would associate them with the world of production and entrepreneurship. On a political level, one of the main problems faced by the profession, as it appears in the articles published in its newspaper, is its respectability and the acceptance of its itinerant way of life by the members of the sedentary society. In other words, what it expressed was a wish to conform to the typical bourgeois values of work, order, and progress. In this process, the fairground organ was again an essential tool, because it was considered a valuable item and symbol or token of modernity. When we turn once more to some advertisements of the time, here an announcement for the Limonaire company from Paris and a product catalog by the Berlin-based firm Tocchi, Bacigalupo, and Graffinia, we see that the medals earned by Limonaire at World's Fairs are mentioned not only once, but twice. Another essential aspect of these products is the way they were made, that is, industrially in factories powered by steam. It is indeed a picture of the factory that is shown on the title page of the catalog. Here, it is proudly shown that the factory neighbors the train station and therefore belongs to a larger network of production, transportation, and consumption. The fairground organ is therefore considered as an instrument of progress in the way it is built and functions, but also in the way it attracts people around it. Here again, the instrument is integrated into a broader dynamic that encompasses both mechanical and live music. Launched with the dramatic increase in urban population following the Industrial Revolution, initiatives were taken to ease access to music for the working class, but also to direct and control how people use their free time. Such initiatives materialize with the design in the town territory of spaces dedicated to welcome this new kind of public, that is, the urban crowd, and to practice what has been called rational recreation. Key examples of such strategies are the building of public parks and bandstands, their appearance going hand in hand with the multiplication of military bands. The intention of rational recreation was to promote a kind of leisure that would not threaten morality, social order, or dominant political views. This evolution resonates with the conceptualization of the fanfare at the end of the 19th century as a site that celebrated progress and modernity. Music, therefore, proves to be a primary component of efforts to deal with crowds and to make them participate in specific social schemes. But such enterprises were not without controversy. While it was used as a tool of attraction, the fairground organ is also considered a source of nuisance. Frequent tensions arose when show people set up in town, and in the records left to us, noise often emerged as the main problem. Here is an example taken from Geneva's main newspaper from November 22nd, 1893. Quote, "These days, strong complaints are being raised among the inhabitants of General Dufour Street and Théâtre Boulevard concerning installation of show people's theaters in front of the Victory Hall. They complain about the noise made by the organ of one of them. Last Sunday, this rather unharmonious sound, music, was heard until 11 p.m. And other reasons, in particular the proximity with the British school, have made some people to decide to start a petition asking for the exhibition installed on General Dufour Street to be taken off." And of course, similar initiatives were taken elsewhere around the same time, notably in France, where an anti-show people league was founded, targeting especially the noise made by fairground workers. This generated debates about the social value of fairgrounds and more generally about what is deemed as popular entertainment. So to conclude, when it comes to situate and describe participants in music making in the public space in the 19th century, the fairground organ proves to be an essential item. This is not only because it was used as an attribute to categorize and establish one's belonging to a specific social class, but because its own status evolved through time. From an instrument associated with vagrancy, the mechanical organ became part of a new framework of values associated with the spectacle of modernity. Therefore, it helps us to reach a richer and more complicated picture of musical phenomena that cannot be simply divided between pure bourgeois practices on one side and popular occupations on the other, as they carry aspirations to economical and political success and to symbolic capital. These instruments, through sound, create situations in which members of different classes came into contact. These situations were not simply the result of pre-existing hierarchies, but in fact invented and enacted them. Very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Another paper which also fascinating distance. Would anybody like to ask a question or offer a comment? Please. Yes.
In which, or whatever, that there is a machine constructed which will replace 30 accomplished musicians. Isn't that kind of the first artificial intelligence idea in our field of music instruments? Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
You didn't understand. A machine which replaces 30 accomplished persons, musicians.
Yeah.
It's a kind of artificial intelligence, you know. Somebody has
exactly.
created something which will replace vivid persons.
Yeah. It's always the same. Yeah.
Just to cheer up at the end of our session.
I think that the notion of, I don't know, and these background organs in terms of this automatic music thing, it's just slightly ahead of recording. So it's just this notion that almost without being conscious and philosophical implications that are certainly the social that are enormous. It's the predetermined noise that is there in order to attract people, and the collateral is that different social families come together. That's I mean, in terms of the theme of this topic, that's phenomenal. No, that may be the first time it happened. I mean, if you think of the film, the sound of the background organs, you know exactly what that means. That only means one thing. But yeah. That's distinct from the organ are they become.
To have always perfect exhibition and to have cheaper performance. It's a like industry.
Yes,
Actually the same idea. Yeah, right. But there are a lot of, at that time, especially on the fin de siècle time, there are a lot of such mechanical instruments, what you said, which could serve various purposes, from small to huge.
Can you say again when this advertisement was?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Can you just repeat when this advertisement was, from which year, with the replacement of the 30 persons?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
From which year was that advertisement with the replacement of the 30 musicians?
You mean this one? Was yeah.
Yes.
1903.
Yeah, 1903. Okay, that's interesting because it's a kind of economization in the musical business, musical instrument business, also, so to say. I didn't know that it's so early because I just know it later when it's starting with the silent film area.
Okay. Yeah.
And in Berlin, with in our musical instrument museum, we have such a huge, mighty Wurlitzer theater organ, and it's the same thoughts in the end. Why to have such a theater organ in the theater or in the cinemas to replace the orchestras which played there before, accompanying the silent films.
Absolutely.
And so you just need one organist and one organ player, and not I don't know, 15 to 20 musicians. It's kind of rationalization, if it's the right word.
Exactly. Yeah. There is something paradoxical in the sense that most of the time the organ wasn't inside the cinema but in front of it, so it didn't share the same space, the screen space. So we are still trying to figure out how music and image really interacted with this kind of configuration.
I was wondering, if I may go on, I was wondering if it's what is bourgeois music culture, because it seems to me that all classes were there at this fairground, and not specifically the bourgeois group of society. Or it's much broader.
Totally. Yeah. There is that's the point. In fact, there is a mix of people, some claiming to correspond to some bourgeois ideal. In that sense, the forain, the show people, they really tried to emulate this class in some sense. And at the same time, what we deem sometimes as simple popular entertainment, we realize through that instrument that it wasn't simply a popular invention. It wasn't necessarily a bottom-up dynamics. We realized that in some sense it was directed from, I wouldn't say from the top, but there is a larger view that is really, I guess, thought about by the bourgeois class, and that contributed to mix different worlds together in some sense.
reminds me a little bit when it's 100 years before that, when the bourgeois is taking over from the nobleman, so taking over the ideas and adapting them to their own use. Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you.
But then, then
Yeah, just to add one sentence, maybe, I don't know if there are any sources for it, but maybe that's also an explanation why you can find these, let's say, military tunes or military pieces on these rolls, these organ rolls for these instruments, because before these organs became popular, the military bands were traveling around in the cities and playing these tunes, and they were quite common known from all the people who were living in the city, because you can go to these garden concerts or whatever, and in the end it's again an economic factor. So
totally, yeah, exactly.
So the earlier papers, earlier in the day, many pictures I saw or descriptions, they reminded me about just what was said before, that this is pretty similar to aristocratic practices. You know, this salon-like setups, 2, 3, maybe 4 people making some music together. That we could also have seen at any aristocratic court or even kind of medium layer aristocracy around, let's say, 1800 or a little bit earlier, and of course also slightly later. And here, this how, and also, you know, in Slavonia, in this among these factory owners and the people who have money, I thought, okay, this looks pretty similar to previous aristocratic practices. I'm not sure whether they still had it as much. So it's a little bit difficult to distinguish. What we saw now, and also in some other papers, I think maybe a way out to designate this is to speak about middle class culture, because then one can also include the lower middle class, you know, which we have seen at these markets, and that might make sense. I mean, it's not proletarian, obviously, right? So the real workers, they probably could not afford it, did not go, or had their own culture. So there is a class difference there, definitely, but middle class, I think, would encompass that maybe in a better way than bourgeois. However, there's, of course, the perennial problem how to translate middle class in other languages. It doesn't work equally well in German, for example. So that is then another problem in terminology. But in English, I've thought what we have seen now, a lot of that is indeed middle class, and then also indeed new, or maybe let's say a parallel public world. Of course, all of this is also to a degree civic.
Also,
okay, that's
it. I mean, I think we better wrap something that this quickly. But I mean, in the English-speaking world, in Britain, for instance, at the end of the 19th century, the fairground was important, and no question. And when it carries forward in cinema, when there are cinematic reenactments of the fairground, it is, in fact, not just working class, but a criminal class associated. So everything we're saying is breakfast, it's more complicated than that, because those class structures collapse. I suspect. Oh, please, one more. Sorry, I didn't see you.
I have a question about the connections between the traditional church organ builders and the background organ builders. Do you know something about that?
Yeah, actually, this is really interesting. Thank you for the question, because most of the organ builders, the more successful one in Europe, they were found between Paris and the Black Forest region. That were the main 2 poles of organ buildings at the time. I didn't see any family that it was a fun family business from families working together. I didn't found any for the moment that had really an organ building background, a traditional organ building background. But most of the time they are from clock makers families. So the link is more likely to be found with mechanical craft and the safety in the sense of the clockwork skills. So with the church organ, there is no, at least in the fragrant organ world, there are connections, of course. They have worked with the church organ builders, but it's not a direct connection in that sense. If that answers the question.
Well, I think we better leave it there, although I would like to renew my thanks, our thanks to all three speakers, for really absorbing session at the end of what was already today. So please let me our thanks.
Thank you very much for your patience and your endurance today. Tomorrow it's a slight shorter day, and you will have time to enjoy the walks around the city and the evening concert. And I hope that you will have a nice time. And just a remembrance, tomorrow at 9 o'clock sharp, because we have our second keynote lecture. Bye.